They called him untouchable. Damian Blackwood, young, ruthless, and already worth more than most families could imagine in 3 lifetimes. To the world, he was the coldest millionaire in the city, a man who never smiled unless it was to close a deal, and who never gave his heart to anyone. So when he announced his engagement, society gasped. Who could possibly tie down a man like him? Her name was Elena Carter. Sweet, soft-spoken, and nothing like the sharp-edged socialites who circled men like Damien. She didn't come from money or influence. In fact, she'd only met him through a business arrangement that left her no choice but to accept his proposal. To her, he was a storm she wanted no part of, a man who made her feel like she was just another transaction in his empire. But the closer the wedding day came, the more Damien surprised her. Behind closed doors, his cold mask would slip in fleeting moments, his hand lingering on hers a little too long, his voice dropping softer when no one else was listening. And one night, when Elena least expected it, he showed her a side of himself that no one else had ever seen. She was engaged to the coldest and most arrogant millionaire, but she never imagined he would make her feel so special. The storm had rolled in just before nightfall, cloaking the city in a restless hush. Sheets of rain slid down the tall windows of Blackwood Tower, blurring the neon skyline into streaks of color, reds, golds, and silvers that shimmered like distant fire. Inside the penthouse, all was glass, steel, and silence, the kind of silence that pressed against the ribs and made every heartbeat sound too loud. Elena Carter stood at the window, her reflection staring back at her with wide, uncertain eyes. The pale silk gown she wore clung to her slender frame, chosen not by her, but by Damien's assistant. Even the diamonds at her throat had not been hers to select. They were Blackwood heirlooms, glittering reminders that she was stepping into a world that had never wanted her. She wasn't from money, not like Damien Blackwood, not like the women who had paraded themselves at his side before, all polished laughter and practiced seduction. Elena had grown up in the quiet outskirts of the city, where love meant shared coffee in chipped mugs, not champagne and crystal flutes. Her parents had believed in love. She once had too, but love had not been part of this bargain. The first time she met Damien, his reputation had entered the room before he did. Everyone whispered about him, his sharp business acumen, his ability to turn failing companies into gold, the ruthless way he cut down competitors. And then there he was, towering in an immaculate suit, his jaw set like carved stone, his eyes as cold as the storm clouds outside. His voice had been even colder. "You'll be my fiancée," he had said, as if he were dictating terms of contract instead of proposing marriage. "You'll attend events, smile when needed, and do exactly as I say. In return, you'll have security for your family." That was it. No tender promises, no hopeful glances, just an arrangement. Elena remembered staring at him across the long table that day, her heart pounding with a mixture of disbelief and something else, something dangerous. For beneath the ice, beneath the arrogance, there had been a flicker of something that pulled at her despite every warning in her soul. Now, weeks later, here she was in his penthouse, preparing for their first public appearance as an engaged couple. The city buzzed below them, unaware that she felt like a lamb being led into a den of wolves. The gala tonight wasn't just about luxury and champagne. It was a battlefield. Everyone in that glittering ballroom would be watching, waiting for her to stumble, for Damien to reveal his true indifference. She turned slightly, glancing at the man who stood a few feet behind her. Damien Blackwood was the kind of man who seemed born of shadows and control. His suit fit his tall, broad frame like a second skin. He was pouring himself a glass of bourbon, his movements precise, as if even the way he lifted a crystal glass was part of some calculated performance. "Are you nervous?" His question cut through the silence, low and unreadable. Elena's throat tightened. She had never known what to say to him. Every word felt like it was being weighed, tested, measured against his impossible standards. She forced her voice steady. "Should I be?" He glanced at her then, and for a fleeting second, his mask shifted. His eyes softened, just barely, as though the storm outside had cracked a small fissure in his walls. But it was gone as quickly as it came. He sipped his drink, turned away, and answered, "Only if you plan on disappointing me." Her heart lurched, not from his cruelty, but from the strange ache that followed it. Why did she care what he thought? Why did his approval feel like oxygen in a world that suffocated her? She turned back to the window, watching the storm roll across the city. Somewhere deep inside, she wondered a dangerous thought. What if this wasn't just an arrangement? What if, hidden beneath his arrogance, there was a man capable of love? The question lingered as thunder rolled across the sky, loud enough to shake the glass. And for the first time since the engagement began, Elena felt something other than dread. She felt curiosity, because if Damian Blackwood was truly the coldest, most arrogant man in the city, why had his eyes just betrayed something that looked achingly close to longing? If you were in Elena's place, facing a loveless engagement with the city's coldest millionaire, yet sensing hidden depths in his eyes, would you risk staying to uncover the truth, or would you run before the storm broke? Share your thoughts in the comments. Elena had never been the kind of girl who believed her life would end up in a penthouse. She grew up in a modest two-bedroom home, with the paint peeled from the walls and the heater clanked through winter nights. Yet what that home lacked in luxury, it overflowed with warmth. Her father's laughter, her mother's gentle humming, her younger brother's endless mischief. Those were the riches that had filled her childhood. But those days felt a world away now. Her father's passing 2 years ago had left their family shaken, and her mother's health had declined soon after. Bills piled up faster than Elena could pay them, her part-time job barely covering essentials. The desperation in her mother's eyes haunted her even now. That was when Damian Blackwood had appeared in her life, not like a savior, but like a storm. His offer of engagement hadn't been a proposal, not in any romantic sense. It had been an ultimatum, security for her family in exchange for her presence at his side. She remembered sitting in the hospital waiting room, her mother frail and coughing softly beside her. Damian's driver had found her there, handed her a sealed envelope, and inside had been his terms. One signature, and every debt would vanish. Her mother's care would be guaranteed, and Elena had signed, not for herself, but for them. Now, as she sat at the vanity in Damian's penthouse while his assistant fastened diamond earrings on her ears, she wondered if she had bartered away her soul. "Hold still," the assistant muttered, a tall woman named Madeline who seemed carved from ice herself. "If you move, you'll drop it." Elena forced herself to stay still, though her reflection betrayed her nerves. The woman in the mirror hardly looked like her anymore. Her hair, once wild waves, was pinned into a sleek chignon. Her dress shimmered in pearl white, delicate yet far too revealing for her comfort. She looked less like Elena Carter, daughter of a modest family, and more like a stranger wearing wealth like a costume. Behind her, she could see Damian's reflection. He had entered the room silently, his suit cut in dark charcoal, his tie perfect, his expression unreadable. He didn't look at her right away, instead checking his cufflinks with the precision of a man who never allowed even a thread to be out of place. "You'll need to do better than that nervous expression," he said coolly, finally meeting her eyes through the mirror. "The world doesn't care if you're afraid. They'll eat you alive if you let them see it." Elena's chest tightened. "I'm not afraid." He arched a brow. "Then prove it." Something in his tone made her bristle, a flicker of fire sparking within her. She wasn't his pawn, not entirely. Slowly, she lifted her chin, forcing the nerves from her face, replacing them with a calm she didn't feel. When she met his gaze again, her reflection showed someone stronger, someone who refused to break under his scrutiny. A muscle flicked in Damien's jaw, the barest sign that she had surprised him. For a moment, silence lingered between them, heavy with something neither could name. Then his phone buzzed in his pocket, and just like that, the connection shattered. He turned away, his voice clipped. "We leave in 20 minutes. Don't be late." Elena let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Madeline gave her a thin smile, adjusting the earrings one last time. "You're braver than you think," she whispered, so quietly Elena almost missed it. That night, as the clock ticked closer to the gala, Elena thought about what bravery meant. To her, bravery wasn't walking into a room filled with billionaires. It wasn't pretending to be someone she wasn't. It was staying true to herself, even when surrounded by wolves. And Damien, what was bravery for him? She couldn't yet tell. All she knew was that he carried his arrogance like armor. But every once in a while, when his mask slipped, she saw a flicker of loneliness. As though beneath all his wealth, all his control, he was still just a man afraid of something he couldn't control. Maybe that was why her heart beat too fast whenever he was near. The storm outside had quieted to a drizzle, but Elena could feel another storm building, the kind not seen in skies, but in the tension between two people forced together by circumstance. Tonight would be the first test. Tonight, she would face not only the cameras and the whispers, but the truth of whether Damien Blackwood was as heartless as he seemed, or if he was hiding something far more dangerous. Do you believe people like Damien, cold, arrogant, untouchable, are ever capable of true love? Or do walls like his stay up forever? Comment below with what you think. The gala was everything Elena had feared and more. Crystal chandeliers spilled golden light across the ballroom, refracting through endless glasses of champagne. The air shimmered with expensive perfume and murmurs of laughter, each conversation layered with hidden envy and rivalry. Women in gowns that cost more than Elena's entire year's rent paraded like peacocks, their jeweled eyes sliding toward her with thinly veiled disdain. Men in sharp suits clinked glasses, their whispers punctuated by stolen glances at Damien Blackwood, the man of the hour. And then there was Elena, his fiancée. Damien's hand rested lightly at the small of her back as they descended the marble steps into the crowd. The touch was possessive, calculated, as if to declare, "She is mine." It sent an involuntary shiver through her, though whether from fear or something more dangerous, she couldn't decide. The first flashbulb blinded her, then another. Cameras erupted like lightning across the ballroom, capturing her every expression, every movement. Elena forced a smile, her heart hammering. Damien leaned close, his voice a low murmur only she could hear. "Smile with your eyes, not just your lips. Don't let them see your nerves." Her jaw clenched, but she obeyed, tilting her chin slightly, letting the smile reach her gaze. The whispers shifted, a ripple of surprise running through the crowd. Maybe she isn't as fragile as we thought. For a moment, Elena felt power in the act. For a moment, she wasn't prey. But then she saw her. Vanessa Quinn, the socialite who had once been rumored to be Damien's lover. Tall, raven-haired, draped in crimson silk that clung to her like liquid fire. She glided toward them with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Well, Vanessa purred, her voice dripping with false sweetness. So this is the woman who managed to chain Damien Blackwood. Her gaze flicked over Elena like she was inspecting merchandise. You must be extraordinary. Elena's pulse spiked. She opened her mouth to reply, but Damien spoke first, his tone cool. Vanessa. That was all. One word, sharp as a blade, laced with warning. But Vanessa only laughed, brushing a manicured hand against his arm before turning back to Elena. Enjoy your moment, darling. In this world, moments don't last. Her words cut deeper than Elena expected. She forced herself to smile politely, but inside, her stomach churned. The evening stretched on with introductions, dances, and toasts. Damien was flawless, commanding every room he entered, his hand never far from her. Yet, Elena began to notice something strange. Whenever she faltered under the pressure, whenever a guest's words cut too close, Damien's hand would press a little firmer against her back, grounding her. When her hand trembled while holding a champagne flute, his fingers brushed hers, steadying her grip. Cold, arrogant, untouchable. And yet, in these subtle gestures, there was something else. Something protective. It was near midnight when the true twist arrived. The host, a silver-haired magnate named Mr. Aldridge, tapped his glass for silence. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, tonight we celebrate not just wealth, but alliances. And what better symbol of strength than the union of Damien Blackwood and his fiancée, Elena Carter? The room erupted in applause. Elena's chest tightened. She hadn't expected this, hadn't been warned that their engagement would be paraded in front of hundreds. Perhaps, Aldridge continued with a grin, we might have a preview of their bond. A dance, maybe? The crowd cheered, chanting for them to take the floor. Elena froze, panic rising. She wasn't prepared for this. The idea of all those eyes on her, waiting for her to stumble, made her knees weak. Then Damien's hand slipped into hers. His grip was firm, steady, his gaze locking onto hers with an intensity that silenced her panic. Trust me, he murmured. The words startled her. She had never imagined Damien Blackwood asking for trust, least of all hers. The orchestra swelled, and he led her onto the dance floor. The crowd formed a circle, watching, whispering. Elena's heart pounded, but as Damien pulled her into his arms, the world blurred into gold and shadow. His touch was confident, guiding her through the steps with effortless precision. And slowly, impossibly, she found herself moving with him, her body attuned to his. For the first time, she saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Not arrogance, not calculation. Something raw, fleeting but real. The dance ended in perfect synchrony, and the ballroom erupted in thunderous applause. Elena's chest heaved, her cheeks flushed. She looked up at Damien, expecting his usual cool detachment. Instead, he leaned closer, his voice a whisper against her ear. You did well. It wasn't much. But the warmth in his tone, the way his hand lingered at her waist even after the music stopped, it was enough to set her heart racing in ways she couldn't understand. And in that moment, under the glow of chandeliers and the watchful eyes of the world, Elena realized something terrifying. Her engagement to the coldest, most arrogant millionaire was no longer just a contract. It was becoming something far more dangerous. If you were Elena, and your arrogant fiancé suddenly showed a glimpse of warmth that felt real, would you let yourself fall, or would you fight it? Tell me in the comments below. The ride home from the gala was cloaked in silence, the city lights flashing through the tinted windows like fragments of a dream. Elena sat beside Damien in the sleek black limousine, her heart still racing from the dance, from the applause, from the way his hand had lingered at her waist a fraction longer than necessary. But if Damien felt any of what she did, he didn't show it. He sat with his shoulders squared, his jaw set, his gaze fixed out the window as though the night sky held answers he refused to share. Elena's fingers twisted in her lap, restless. She wanted to ask him, why had he looked to her that way during the dance? Why had his voice softened when he whispered, "Trust me"? But the words stuck in her throat, swallowed by the fear of shattering whatever fragile thread had formed between them. It was Damien who finally spoke. "You handled yourself well tonight." His tone was clipped, almost businesslike, but his eyes flicked toward her with something unreadable. Elena let out a shaky laugh. "That's the closest thing to a compliment I've heard from you." For a heartbeat, silence. Then the corner of his mouth twitched as though he fought a smile and lost. It was gone in an instant, but it left Elena breathless. The next day, the headlines exploded. Blackwood's mystery fiancé captivates gala. Who is Elena Carter? Cinderella or pawn? Damien Blackwood, finally human? Elena scrolled through the articles with trembling hands. Some praised her elegance. Others mocked her for daring to stand beside a man like Damien. One cruel gossip column called her a fragile doll, destined to crack under pressure. Her stomach knotted. She didn't belong in this world. Every word reminded her of it. That afternoon, as she tried to sneak away for a breath of air on the penthouse balcony, she found Damien there, already leaning against the railing, his tie loosened, a glass of bourbon in his hand. "They're vultures," he said without looking at her. "Don't give their words power." Elena wrapped her arms around herself. "Easy for you to say. You were born into this world. I wasn't." He turned then, his gaze sharp. "You think I was born into this?" The question startled her. She realized, suddenly, that she knew almost nothing of his past. He never spoke of his childhood, his family, his rise. To the world, Damien Blackwood had simply appeared at the top. She opened her mouth, but before she could ask, the balcony door slid open. Vanessa Quinn stepped out, her crimson lips curling into a smile that sent chills down Elena's spine. "Darling," Vanessa cooed, her eyes locked on Damien. "I didn't get a chance to congratulate you last night. You always did have a flair for surprises." Damien's jaw tightened, but he didn't move. Vanessa's gaze shifted to Elena, lingering with cruel amusement. "You looked radiant, Elena. Truly. But remember, diamonds don't make you part of this world. They just hide the cracks." Before Elena could respond, Damien's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Vanessa, leave." The words were low, dangerous, final. For a moment, Vanessa looked shocked. Then she laughed, tossed her hair, and slipped back inside. Elena stood frozen, the echo of Vanessa's words gnawing at her chest. Cracks. She already felt them. Damien's voice softened, surprising her. "Don't let her get to you. She thrives on weakness." Elena turned to him, her voice breaking. "And what if I am weak? What if I can't survive this world of yours?" For the first time, she saw it. His mask faltering, his eyes shadowed with something almost vulnerable. He stepped closer, so close she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Then I'll make sure you survive," he said quietly. Her breath caught. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to reach for him, to bridge the impossible distance between them. But just as the moment thickened, Damien stepped back, his expression shuddering once more. "You should rest. We have another event tomorrow." And just like that, the wall was back. That night, Elena lay awake in the cavernous bed that felt too big, too empty. She thought of his words, of the flicker of something human in his eyes. And she wondered if she was imagining it all, if the man beneath the arrogance truly existed, or if she was chasing shadows. But the truth was undeniable. The more she saw of him, the more she wanted to know. And that one was dangerous, because every time Damien showed her a glimpse of warmth, her heart forgot the rules. And every time he shut her out, it broke just a little more. The storm between them was building, and Elena knew it was only a matter of time before it broke. The following evening brought another event, smaller than the gala, but no less suffocating. A private dinner hosted by a board member at Damien's firm, attended by partners, investors, and the ever-watchful society elite. Elena walked beside Damien into the candlelit hall, the murmur of conversation dipping as all eyes turned. Whispers rippled through the crowd, still curious, still skeptical. She lifted her chin, hiding the storm inside. But tonight felt different. Damien's hand didn't just rest at her back, it lingered. His touch steadied her when her breath hitched, guided her through conversations with practiced ease. He was colder than ice to his rivals, sharper than glass in negotiations, but whenever his gaze fell on her, it softened, barely, fleetingly, yet enough to make her chest ache. They dined beneath a canopy of chandeliers, laughter echoing like crystal bells. Elena forced polite smiles, answered shallow questions. She thought she was holding her own until she heard it. A whisper, sharp as a dagger. "She's not his equal, just a convenient face. Everyone knows it." The words sliced through her composure. She turned, only to find two women leaning close, their jeweled eyes glittering with cruelty. Before Elena could respond, Damien spoke. His voice carried across the table, low but lethal. "Careful. I don't take kindly to disrespect toward my fiancée." The table fell silent. The women blanched, fumbling apologies. But Damien's gaze stayed fixed on them until they squirmed. Then, as if nothing had happened, he reached for his wine and moved the conversation forward. Elena sat frozen, her heart pounding. He had defended her, not for image, not for publicity, but with a heat that felt dangerously real. Later, after the dinner, she found herself alone in the library of their host's estate, desperate for a breath away from prying eyes. The air smelled of leather and oak, the silence heavy. She traced the spines of books she'd never afford, trying to steady herself. That was when she heard voices. The door was ajar, and from the hall came Damien's low baritone. "I told you to keep quiet." Another voice, a man's, rougher, mocking. "And I told you, secrets don't stay buried forever, Blackwood. Not even yours." Elena froze, her pulse spiking. Damien's reply was sharp. "If she finds out..." The man sneered. "You mean the pretty little fiancée? Does she know why you chose her?" Elena's stomach dropped. She pressed closer to the door, every nerve alight. "Enough," Damien snapped. "Leave before you regret this." Footsteps. A door slammed. Silence. Elena stood trembling, her mind racing. "Secrets. Why you chose me." The words echoed like thunder. She had always believed the engagement was about power, convenience, security for her family. But what if there was more? What if Damien was hiding something far bigger than his arrogance? The door creaked, and Damien appeared. His eyes widened when he saw her, standing in the shadows of the library. "Elena," he said slowly, his tone unreadable. "How much did you hear?" Her voice shook. "Enough." For the first time, she saw something raw in his eyes, fear. Damien Blackwood, the untouchable millionaire, looked like a man cornered. He stepped closer, his mask slipping with every word. "You weren't supposed to know." "Not yet." "Know what?" she demanded. "Why did you really choose me?" The silence stretched until it felt like the room itself held its breath. Then Damien exhaled, the weight of years collapsing in his voice. "Because you remind me of someone I lost." Elena's breath caught. "My mother," he continued, his gaze fixed on the floor as though saying the words cost him everything. "She was strong, but the world tried to break her. When I saw you, defiant, unyielding, even when you had nothing, I saw her. I swore I would never let you be broken the way she was." The confession left Elena reeling. She had expected manipulation, calculation, but not this. Not vulnerability. Her voice softened. "Damien," his eyes finally met hers, and for the first time, she saw the man behind the armor. The loneliness, the grief, the desperate need to protect, even if it meant chaining himself to arrogance and control. And suddenly, the walls between them felt thinner than ever. Without thinking, Elena stepped closer. The distance between them shrank to a breath, the air charged with something neither could name. His hand hovered near hers, hesitating, as though afraid of breaking the fragile moment. When his fingers finally brushed against her skin, fire shot through her veins. "Elena," he murmured, her name like a prayer he wasn't allowed to say. She should have stepped back. She should have remembered this was just an arrangement, a contract, a cage. But her heart betrayed her, pounding wildly, urging her closer. The library door banged open. A servant appeared, startled, mumbling an apology. The moment shattered. Damien stepped back, his mask slamming shut. "We should go." But Elena's world had already shifted. The arrogant millionaire wasn't just a man of power and control. He was a man haunted, broken, carrying secrets he had tried to bury. And worst of all, her heart now ached not just with fear of him, but with something far more dangerous. Longing. The library revelation haunted Elena long after they left the dinner. Damien had opened a door she never expected him to open, revealing grief, vulnerability, and a motive that was both tender and terrifying. But the door had slammed shut again just as quickly, and now she was left wondering if she had imagined it all. For days, Damien was colder than ever. He left before dawn for meetings, returned late at night, and barely spoke more than a clipped word or two at dinner. The warmth of that near confession, the tremor in his voice when he'd spoken of his mother, vanished into silence. Elena told herself she shouldn't care. This was the arrangement. This was survival. But the truth gnawed at her. She missed the flicker of humanity she had glimpsed. The press did not make things easier. Rumors spiraled like wildfire. Blackwood fiancé unworthy? Secret tensions behind closed doors. Paparazzi camped outside Blackwood Tower, waiting for cracks to appear. And cracks did appear. One evening, when Damien returned home, Elena confronted him in the dimly lit penthouse. "Why are you shutting me out?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "You let me see a piece of you, and now it's like it never happened. Was it all a mistake?" His jaw tightened, his eyes cold. You don't understand the weight of what you heard. Some truths are too dangerous to share. For your own sake, stay out of them. For my sake, her laugh was bitter. Or for yours, silence. His gaze burned into hers, but he said nothing. And that silence spoke louder than any answer could. The next day, the tabloids exploded with scandal. Photographs of Damien and Vanessa Quinn, caught leaving a private restaurant together. The headlines screamed betrayal. Blackwood returns to old flame. Fiancé cast aside already. Elena's hands shook as she read the articles. The images were damning. Damien walking beside Vanessa, his hand at the small of her back in the exact place he always touched Elena. Her heart clenched, but what hurt most wasn't the possibility of betrayal. It was the hollow ache of believing, even for a moment, that maybe she hadn't meant anything to him after all. When Damien came home that night, Elena was waiting. The photos lay scattered on the glass coffee table. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Did you go back to her?" His eyes flicked to the papers, then back to her. "It's not what it looks like. That's not an answer." She cornered me after a meeting. I didn't want to cause a scene in public. Elena shook her head, tears burning her eyes. "You don't get it, do you? Every time I start to think there's more to you than this armor, you remind me exactly why I should run. I can't live like this, Damien. I can't keep wondering if I'm just another pawn in your empire." For a heartbeat, his face crumpled, pain, raw and fleeting. Then the walls slammed back into place. "Maybe you should leave then," he said quietly. The words hit harder than any scream. Elena stared at him, her chest hollowing out. And then, with trembling hands, she pulled the engagement ring from her finger and set it on the table. "If that's what you want," she whispered, "then I will." She packed her things that night. Not much, just the clothes she'd brought with her, a few keepsake from home. The diamonds, the gowns, the borrowed life she had been forced into, she left them all behind. The storm outside mirrored the one in her chest as she slipped into a cab, the city lights blurring through rain-soaked glass. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't stay. Back in the penthouse, Damien stood at the window, the engagement ring glinting on the table behind him. His fists clenched at his sides, his chest heaving with a war he couldn't win. For the first time in years, he felt something dangerously close to fear. Because Elena hadn't just been a pawn. She hadn't just been convenience. Somewhere along the way, she had become the one person who saw the man behind the empire. And now she was gone. The city stretched beneath him, but Damien Blackwood had never felt more alone. And for Elena, the darkness was just beginning. If you were Elena, would you have walked away after the photos and Damien's silence? Or would you have stayed to fight for answers? Tell me what your heart would choose. The city always looked different when your heart was broken. Elena sat in the tiny apartment she had rented on the far side of town, staring at the peeling wallpaper and listening to the hum of traffic below. It wasn't the penthouse, it wasn't luxury, but it was hers. And for the first time in weeks, she could breathe. Or at least, she told herself that. In truth, her breaths were shallow, her chest heavy. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Damien's face, his coldness, his silence, the way he had said, "Maybe you should leave." The words carved into her like glass. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She ignored it. Probably another tabloid headline, another reminder of the world she no longer belonged to. But then came a knock on her door. Sharp, urgent. She froze. No one knew where she was, not even her mother, not yet. Slowly, she crossed the small apartment, her pulse hammering. When she opened the door, she nearly staggered. Damien stood there. The storm outside had left his suit damp, his hair mussed, but his eyes were fire. "Elena," he said, his voice low, rougher than she'd ever heard it. "You shouldn't have left." Her throat tightened. Anger surged to replace the ache. "You told me to." His jaw clenched. "I didn't mean it." "Then what did you mean, Damien?" "Because every time I think I understand you, you push me away. I can't keep living in your shadow, wondering if you'll ever let me in." He stepped closer, the storm dripping from his coat onto the floor, but he didn't care. His hand lifted as though to touch her face, then faltered midair. "I've spent my whole life building walls," he admitted, his voice breaking in a way that made her breath hitch. "Walls to keep people out. Because when you let people in, they leave. Or worse, they die. And when I saw you, I told myself it was just business. Just convenience. But I was lying. To you. To myself." Elena's chest ached. "Then why Vanessa? Why let the world think?" "I didn't choose her," he cut in sharply. "I haven't chosen anyone since you. Don't believe the photographs. Don't believe them over me." Tears stung her eyes. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. But the fear of being broken again loomed large. "Why now?" she whispered. "Why come here?" His eyes locked onto hers, unflinching. "Because losing you showed me something I never thought I'd feel again. Fear. Not of scandal, not of rivals. Of living without you." The words stole her breath. But before she could respond, the phone on her counter buzzed again. She glanced at it, and her blood ran cold. The screen flashed with a message from an unknown number. "You don't belong with him. Leave now, or you'll regret it." Elena's hand trembled as she showed it to Damien. His face darkened, his entire body going rigid. "They're watching you," he said grimly. "I should have known this would happen." "Who?" Elena's voice shook. "The same people who've been waiting for me to fall since the day I built this empire. Rivals. Enemies. They'll use you to get to me." His hand finally touched her then, firm and protective at her shoulder. "This is why I kept my distance. I thought keeping you at arm's length would keep you safe." Her heart thundered. And did it? His silence was answer enough. For the first time, Elena saw Damien not as a fortress of arrogance, but as a man surrounded by enemies, torn between his empire and his heart. Slowly, she placed her hand over his, her voice trembling but strong. "You can't fight them alone, and I can't keep running from you. If you really want me, then let me stand with you." His eyes searched hers, disbelief flickering into awe. Then, for the first time, Damien Blackwood let his walls fall completely. He pulled her into his arms, his embrace fierce, desperate, as though he had been starving for it. Elena clung to him, the storm outside rattling the windows but no longer reaching them. The world was against them. Rivals circled, danger loomed, trust was fragile. But in that moment, united in vulnerability, they found something stronger than fear. Hope. The morning after Damien appeared at her apartment, the threat became real. Elena awoke to shouting outside her window. Paparazzi had found her, crowds of cameras and flashing lights swarming the street, voices shouting her name, questions like knives in the air. "Did Damien pay you to stay? Are you the reason his company is crumbling? Do you love him or his money?" Her chest tightened, panic rising. But before she could crumble, the door burst open. Damien stood there, flanked by 2 bodyguards, his expression carved from steel. "Pack your things," he ordered. "Now." Elena stared at him, torn between fury and relief. "You think this solves anything? Running?" His eyes softened, just barely. "No, fighting does." Within the hour, she was swept into the back of his car, the chaos of cameras flashing like lightning in their wake. She should have been angry at him for dragging her back into the fire. But when his hand found hers, strong and unwavering, she realized something. Damien wasn't just fighting for his empire anymore. He was fighting for her. That evening, Damien called a press conference. The ballroom of Blackwood Tower brimmed with reporters, flashes exploding like stars. Elena stood at his side, her heart pounding as he stepped to the podium. "You've all speculated. You've all tried to tear her down," Damien said, his voice low, steady, powerful. "So let me make this clear. Elena Carter is not here because of business or image or convenience. She's here because I chose her. And if you try to come after her again, you'll answer to me." The crowd erupted. Questions, shouts, chaos. Elena felt her breath catch. Damien had just done the one thing she never thought he'd do: expose his heart to the world. But the enemies watching weren't finished. As the press conference ended, Vanessa Quinn appeared, her heels clicking like daggers against the marble. She strode forward, voice sharp enough to slice glass. "You think this is love, Damien? She's nothing. And when you fall, she'll fall with you." The crowd gasped. Cameras whirred. Before Elena could speak, Damien moved, stepping in front of her, shielding her with his body. "Enough, Vanessa. You've done your worst." And yet here she stands, stronger than you'll ever be. Elena's breath hitched. He wasn't just defending her, he was claiming her. But then came the final blow. A man emerged from the crowd. Mr. Aldridge, the board magnate who had toasted them at the gala. His smirk was poison. "Blackwood," he drawled, holding up a sheaf of papers. "What about this? Proof of your debts, your company's vulnerabilities, the fact that you're not as invincible as you pretend. Does your precious fiancé know the empire she's marrying into is about to crumble?" Gasps rippled across the room. Flashes exploded. Elena's world tilted. Debt? Vulnerability? This was the secret Damien had hidden. The room spun, but Damien's voice cut through, thunderous. "You think I'm ashamed of struggle? That I'd hide it?" He turned, his hand closing around Elena's, lifting it high for all to see. "The truth is this. I have built from nothing before, and I will build again if I must. But I will not do it alone. Not anymore." His gaze burned into hers, fierce and unyielding. "Because she's not my weakness. She's my strength." The reporters roared. The board members whispered. Aldridge faltered, his smirk slipping. Vanessa's face twisted in rage. But none of it mattered, because in that moment, Elena realized the truth. Damien wasn't cold because he didn't feel. He was cold because he had felt too deeply once and lost everything. And now, standing before the world, he was choosing to risk everything again. Her heart broke open, rebuilt itself in the space of a heartbeat. Tears burned her eyes, but her voice was steady when she spoke into the microphone Damien offered her. "They can say what they want, but I know who Damien is, and I choose him. Not the empire, not the money. Him." The room erupted in chaos, but in the middle of it, Damien pulled her into his arms. His lips found hers, fierce and desperate, sealing their truth before the world. It was reckless. It was dangerous. It was love. For the first time, the coldest, most arrogant millionaire wasn't untouchable anymore. He was hers. The fallout from the press conference was immediate. Headlines exploded across every paper and news site. Blackwood declares his love in fiery defense. Empire at risk, but fiancé stands firm. Is this the real Damien Blackwood? For once, the stories weren't just about scandal. They were about them, about the man who had bared his soul in front of the world, and the woman who had chosen to stand beside him anyway. Elena sat in the quiet of the penthouse living room the next morning, sunlight spilling across the marble floor. It felt surreal, almost fragile, like waking from a dream you weren't sure you wanted to end. She traced her fingers along the rim of her coffee cup, her heart still racing from the whirlwind of the night before. The sound of footsteps drew her gaze. Damien entered the room. No immaculate suit this time, just dark slacks, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, his hair slightly mussed. For once, he looked less like the cold, untouchable millionaire and more like a man who had fought through a storm and survived. "Good morning," he said softly. She smiled faintly. "Is it?" He crossed the room, pausing in front of her, his gaze steady. "It is, because you're still here." Her breath caught. There was no arrogance in his tone, no mask, just truth. Slowly, Damien lowered himself to one knee before her. From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box. Not with the Blackwood heirloom ring she had worn before, but with a new one, simple and elegant, gleaming in the sunlight. "Elena Carter," he said, his voice unsteady for the first time she had ever heard it. "I asked you to be my fiancée for the wrong reasons. I offered you safety, security, convenience. But last night, I realized none of that matters. Because for the first time in my life, I don't want to win or conquer or prove anything. I just want you, not as part of a deal, not as protection, as my partner, as my love, as my wife." Tears blurred Elena's vision. Her hands trembled as she pressed them to her lips. "Damien," he opened the box, revealing the ring. "Will you marry me? Not for them, not for appearances, but for us." The world seemed to pause, holding its breath. And then Elena laughed through her tears, nodding as she threw her arms around him. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, his hand shaking, and when he looked at her, the coldness that had once defined him was gone. In its place burned warmth, devotion, and a fierce kind of love that belonged only to her. When his lips met hers, it wasn't the desperate kiss of the press conference. It was slower, deeper, filled with promise. A vow sealed not by spectacle, but by two hearts finally laid bare. The days that followed were still chaotic. Rivals tried to spin the story. Board members questioned Damien's decisions. The press speculated endlessly about their future. But through it all, Elena no longer felt like a pawn in his empire. She felt like his equal, his anchor, his choice. One evening, as they stood together on the balcony overlooking the city, the storm clouds of the past finally cleared. The skyline glittered with promise, the air warm and still. "Do you regret it?" Elena asked softly, leaning into his side. "Risking everything for me?" Damien turned, cupping her face in his hands. "I don't see it as a risk. I see it as the only thing worth fighting for. Empires can crumble, fortunes can vanish, but if I have you, I have everything." Her heart swelled, and she pressed her forehead against his. "Then we'll build everything together. Not out of fear, not out of power, out of love." And for once, Damien Blackwood smiled. Not the polished, practiced smile of the millionaire, but the raw, unguarded smile of a man who had finally found peace. Together, they stood at the edge of the city, not as master and pawn, not as contract and convenience, but as two souls who had battled through storms and come out stronger. The coldest and most arrogant millionaire had been broken open, not by enemies, not by rivals, but by love. And Elena, who had once thought herself too ordinary to stand in his world, realized she had never been ordinary at all. She had been extraordinary enough to change him. And now, they would face forever together. Do you believe love has the power to break even the coldest hearts, the way Elena's love broke Damien's walls? Share your thoughts. I'd love to hear them. Sparkling Heart.